Ingram Smith, Bud Elliott, back again for another episode of the Nolecast. Tonight's positional preview will be the offensive line. Fun discussion laying ahead of us. Want to thank our sponsors real quickly. The legendary team of Chad and Shannon, 844 FSU Loan, 500 plus listeners now have gotten a loan through those two gentlemen. Awesome experience, and the numbers speak for themselves. So let's talk about a group that, kind of similar to a group we're about to talk about as well, has gone through as dramatic a transformation as you could hope for. Maybe not one of the better units in the country, but miles, and I do mean like country miles from where it was in recent offensive line previews that we've done. So fun conversation in front of us, in my opinion.
Do you remember sitting there in that first Willie year and we're like, all right, so they're definitely not going to get the Josh Ball thing approved. And then what's his name went down in practice and we're like, oh, dude, this is rough. Like if this guy doesn't get back, they're screwed. You know, they're just so much better than they used to be. It's certainly not an elite unit. I'll just jump here off the bat. Don't want to be negative. Do want to kind of set parameters for this discussion. When people say this is the number 3 offensive line in the country, y'all are smoking crack. Okay, like that. I'm serious here. Like, please seek help. They are extremely experienced as an offensive line. They were very much improved last year. I think they have the chance to be better than a lot of people actually think if they play, to their ceiling. But yeah, like let's set sort of the basis for last year. So you had a couple guys who played almost all the snaps on the season. I mean, Gibbons played 704. Maurice Smith, your center, played 694, and Dimitri Emanuel played 691. So that's basically, almost the entire season.
Did Rob Scott miss any swaths? He had to be north of 650 or so. What was his number?
So these are pre-bowl games. So for most teams, I cut my power ratings off before the bowl game. So I've been working on my power ratings all day.
Okay.
So basically, if you played in the bowl game, add like how many snaps in that game? 65-ish. So
probably a safe number. Yeah.
So yeah, Scott missed about like a game and a half worth of games, I think, roughly relative to some of the other guys. He definitely got hurt against Louisville. Remember that? Because he went down.
Who didn't,
Jordan,
dog?
Yeah. Jordan went down. Exactly. And then Darius Washington, pre-bowl, played like 300 something. So he played 18 snaps at center and about 140 on the left side and 180 at right tackle. If you look at this last year, if you look at like the sustained block rate, the blown block rate that you can get from like Sports Info Solutions, the pressure rate allowed relative to position, what you saw is, I think, a fairly well-coached unit that is much improved from where it was last year, and a unit that I think is certainly is, but was probably top half in college football last year. I think we would say like it definitely ascended into the top 60. And I think even within a Power 5, there's 68 Power 5 teams. I think you could safely say that last year it was roughly a top 35 or so unit. Now people might quibble with that, but LSU had an excellent defensive line. So did the Louisville. Wake Forest had, one guy drafted and one guy who's transferring and is going to, start for Oklahoma. NC State had some dudes. Clemson definitely had some dudes. Miami had some dudes. Remember how Spurrier used to say, like, what team did he talk about? Like, it was South Carolina or Tennessee. He's like, they're just like the best darn team. They just doesn't seem to play well when they play us. Type line, back in the day. And then Florida, they didn't really have a ton of dudes there, but they actually played well at times. So you had a decent schedule of defensive lines you played. And I mean, I have some, I don't know, I'm not going to bore everybody with offensive line stats. We actually like having good listener numbers, but man, interior pressure, like assigned to the interior guys, was relatively low. Emmanuel had like a very low like whiff rate where it just doesn't touch anybody. So that was encouraging. I kind of like his awareness that they picked him up from Charlotte last year. Gibbons sort of the same thing. Not the most athletic guy. Certainly played hurt a lot, as I know we both know. Tackle was really kind of the problem. You had Jazz Turrentine, who was not a. First of all, he was absolutely a blessing that they got him in and used the last scholarship on him, but he did struggle at times. And then Rob Scott, especially when he got hurt, allowed a pressure rate of over 4%. Darius Washington, who was certainly hurt for a lot of the year, pressure rate of over 4.5%. So I think it's easier to hide your tackles, or excuse me, to hide your interior guys than his tackles, and we definitely saw that. Like, offensive line is a weak link system typically. Like, you're not as good as your best guy. You're good as your worst guy, and their worst guys last year were frequently whoever was playing the offensive tackle position. So I'm curious, to see how much better they can be this year at that spot. And they kind of have to be if this team wants to get to where, people in the Tampa Knowles Club ask us about going, right? I mean, that was part of, I think, your answer or my answer. If they're going to win a national title, which I don't think either of us think that they're going to win a national title, but like, that was the question. Like, what has to happen? Some things definitely have to happen here at tackle. Like, you're not going to get there running the 4% pressure rate allowed from both tackle spots. Just that's not going to work.
Yeah, agree. And at the same time, there's reason not to think that you're going to be elite, but to think that you could be better than you would have imagined. Might not have ever really gotten a chance to see your best tackle last year. I mean, the more that I watch, not trying to hype a kid up too much, the more that I watch practice and scrimmage, Bless Harris is legit. I mean, Bless Harris is an exciting player who I think if he's healthy, you can have reason for that improved level of play potentially coming from him. We could probably spend 2 or 3 minutes talking about where Byers is best deployed and what that means if he's playing either guard or tackle. But, Byers is cut from a little bit of a different cloth when it comes to just the physical specimen ability. Those two dudes are your tackles, at least until, Rob Scott has a chance to come back and fully make a run at regaining his position, etc. I think you have reason to be optimistic in the long term that those two guys could bring you a pretty decently raised level of play.
And if
Both
you're
of
new
them
to
are
the
very
show,
impressive.
or if you're somebody who kind of takes the offseason off, right? You're probably like, who the hell is Bless Harris? Who is Jeremiah Byers? Bless Harris is a kid they got last year from a lower division school called Lamar. And he came in, he was going to be one of the starting tackles, although he was kind of raw. He does the whole separated shoulder thing, if I recall, in the first game. So he's going to miss the game against LSU and the rest of the year, which is why they had to have Jazz Turrentine make the emergency start there against LSU. Jeremiah Byers was a first-team All-Conference USA player for UTEP, who not quite as long as Bless, I don't think, but like he's very, very built. I'll throw this one at you. And you mentioned it, obviously. Like maybe in the longer term of the year, Rob Scott's able to get back, fully. Norvell's mentioned kind of how they're trying to work him back in. True or false? They need Jeremiah Byers to play close to his 80th or 90th percentile of what he can be if they want to stay in the playoff race through September.
Yeah, most likely. I mean, I don't think I need to overthink that too much. I mean, LSU's line is LSU's line, and Clemson. You're still talking about a school that has great pieces out there. Now, whether or not they play like it, we'll see. But you're talking about a game that team, that program has been able to schedule on their calendar for 8 or 9 months now. You're going to get it at night. You're going to get everything that atmosphere has. And part of that is having tackles who have the ability to play in an environment like that and trust themselves to be able to do that. So, yeah, I don't think I should probably overthink that. I should just think, yeah, that's definitely what you'll need. This is an interesting schedule. If you could get through that first 4, either 2-0 or 1-1, then you don't want to be presumptuous. You don't want to overlook anybody. You don't want to be disrespectful. But you've got a series of games in which you could probably play with that offensive line a little bit and try to figure out, if you're starting 5, and by that I mean your starting five that you're coming out of the blocks with. Here, maybe it's still the same starting five. Maybe it's somebody lines up a different position. Maybe it's Casey Roddick ends up being a guard in time. We'll just have to see. You brought a lot of impressive physical specimens in the portal, and so far, a lot of the domestic talent has fought those kids off. But it's going to be a battle. It's going to be fun to watch.
They are in a weak link system like the offensive line. I have not felt as good about the floor, and I'm going to, knock on wood here. I have not felt as good about the floor of the offensive line in probably close to a decade, honestly, in terms of having 7 or 8 guys who I feel reasonably confident can play at a level that will allow me to win almost all the games in conference. And then you have certain dudes look at Jalen, look at Julian, like guys like that who, if that's your 8 and 9 guys who we do project to eventually, most likely, assuming that they are continuing to progress upon the same trajectory and pace that they have been on, that likely evolve into multi-year starters for you.
My belief, you have a future NFL player on your roster. You're not even talking about playing, and that's a damn good thing. You need to let some of those things incubate. You need to let them have time, and the fact that you can get a kid like Simmons on campus and not have to worry about rushing him even into a too deep type situation, I think is great, and I think it's probably the best thing you could do for somebody like that long term.
Completely agree. So some things that I thought last year gave this group trouble. This is not insider information. If I have this, I guarantee you that teams like LSU and Clemson, who employ like 8 or 10 analysts who are professional like football evaluators, and all they do is grind tape, and they're definitely going to grind tape of the top team that you play on the schedule. They certainly have this too. Speed off the edge, which, hey, like that's kind of common sense. But the group that you had last year at the tackle spot really did struggle with that. I am curious, like, A, guard body type thing versus tackle body, B, injury, how much can be attributed to that? I definitely do not think that it was, all technique. Pass protection in obvious passing downs is something that needs to improve for this group. They need to be able to give Jordan Travis a little bit longer when the opponent knows that he's going to throw the football. I also, in looking at this, you can kind of do splits like time to immediate pressure. And while I do think that Alex Atkins' group is much better coached than it was in prior years, and he's done a great job with it, and communication has certainly improved, and I'll do credit, certainly. And they continue to get better. Again, this should be the best offensive line in about a decade or so. They did have too many instances where they allowed like immediate pressure, and those do have a correlation. We know turnovers are random mostly. The immediate pressure stuff where like somebody is on you, you don't really have a chance to make a move because the line either just got whipped immediately or they miscommunicated something and didn't pick up something. Those situations, from what I can tell, do have a stronger correlation to causing turnovers, and they certainly are drive killers. So if you're going to tell me that this is the number 3 offensive line in the country due to experience, which I guess I think Phil Steele had him as that or something, like that's, again, I do think this is a good offensive line.
I mean, experience I can buy. I mean, Meach has been playing football for a long damn time. There's a lot of snaps on here, definitely.
Yeah, like Meach might get a home loan soon. Honestly, like Chad and Shannon hook him up, man.
If Chad or Shannon were to sit down with Meach, he would get a home loan shortly thereafter. I can promise you.
Look
Impressive
at that.
kid.
I want to see that experience pay off in terms of, if you beat me, you need to beat me physically, having very few mental mistakes, right? Play to that experience level. Do not allow the immediate penetration because you miscommunicated something. A couple games to me stand out like that, kind of for different reasons. Clemson and Florida are the main 2 there, where they just had some guys immediately. I know NC State got a total free runner a couple times, and it's not like you're never going to have it happen. That's not particularly realistic. But I do think that that is an area which needs to improve. Short yardage, also something which I think maybe we talk about Casey Roddick here, honestly, because of how much bigger he is, and replacing Dylan Gibbons, him at the guard spot, to me makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's a big dude, and I know Colorado was horrendous last year, but that's a nice pull by FSU. With Derek Ray, a guy who was out there in the Pac-12 and probably saw him before.
Big dude. You brought him in, I think, with the idea of being your center. That didn't work out, at least not as of yet. Haven't seen anything to make me think that's going to change. Yeah, just a big physical guy. You'll like this, bud. Like, exceptionally strict with his diet. Takes things very seriously. Doesn't, is here to have a season and go try to be a professional football player. And is pretty singular focused in the very small observations or opportunities that I've had to judge. But an impressive kid who, if we're just playing a video game here, we're not. But if we're just playing a video game with how strong, blah blah blah, you would have loved for this guy to have been your starting center. That would have been it. Come in
for sure.
Didn't work out, and it'll be interesting to see what it looks like as guard. I think depending, it just depends on when Scott becomes back, what level he's at, and man, if you're 4-0 and you've handled the challenges that come from playing LSU and Clemson, it's going to be tough to shake that offensive line a whole lot up either. I mean, you don't lose your job to injury, except people lose their job to injury all the damn time. It's just an unfortunate thing about sports, as much as coaches may say otherwise. So we'll have to see what happens. I am really excited to see what this unit looks like. I'm not trying to blow smoke, though. What really makes me realize how special this unit has gotten, relatively speaking to where it's come from. I'm not trying to gas it up too much, but like, I don't know how much we're going to see Schrader or Estes this year. But those dudes will flash at practice. I mean, Schrader blocked a defensive lineman's ass off that the beat, rightfully so, can't stop talking about on a couple of plays that I watched, and Estes will flash as well. There are nice pieces up front, and there are nice pieces right behind them too. This is a legitimate unit of 10 or 11 guys that, as you're fond of saying, if they have to come in and play, you don't have to like fully rework what you're trying to do schematically. It's not to the layman. If you lose your guard in the second quarter, I don't think all of a sudden you're going to sit there and be like, my Lord, we can't, all of a sudden you can't block the interior. We can't do anything where we pull, etc. It's an impressive unit, and there's not a whole lot that Alex Atkins doesn't put his thumb on, and it improved dramatically in this position group is probably the most, the primary piece of evidence of that.
You want more evidence? I mean, like you mentioned it, obviously Schrader and Estes, dude, like Simmons in prior years. You can't tell me that kid would not have been pushed into duty.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Jalen would have. I think Armella certainly by now in prior
Armella
years,
would be starting in any other iteration of this offensive line over the past 5 or 6 years. Yeah.
100%. I mean, like that's a really good reason I think to feel better. A couple other things, just going through notes of things that I was like, okay, based on like our reviews of last year's games, I want to force guys to blitz this team more because they can't get home with 4. I would like to see the pressure rate allowed against 3 and 4, but especially 3 man rushes go down. If you look at some of Jordan's stuff, some of his, and we covered this a little bit on the first episode, but we're trying not to do half an hour on each position group, because that does take quite a long time to listen to if you're trying to binge watch this in the week leading up to the game. We have some other fun, cool episodes coming for you too. Some of his stuff, like some of Jordan's performance against 3-man rush, so drop 8 type stuff, was a little bit lower than expectation. And I do think that's because the pressure rate allowed against 3-man rush was disappointing. And that, I mean, if you're a top 10 or top 20, but certainly if you really think you're a top 10 unit, you should be stonewalling 3-man rushes consistently. Like, that's communication. You basically have 2 doubles. If you keep it back in, you have, technically 3. Granted, a lot of teams will check the back and send them into the pattern, but regardless, need to see a little bit better with that. Like, I want to see teams blitz Florida State more often. If you look at this, they actually were 10th in the nation in terms of blitzes per dropback, right? Which is kind of interesting. So I want to invite the blitz even more, see how they do, right? And to see that happen. Short yardage, we talked about, like, they improved their stuff rate really well. I mean, they were 64th in prior years. That was, a ton. Penalties per game is something to improve. They were still 116th in offensive line penalties per game. So that's like bottom 10% in the nation. Definitely need to see a little bit of that go down. But yeah, man, I think this group is trending in the right direction for sure. And like, nobody's going to have perfect stuff. I do think they're well coached. Clearly, having Jordan in his legs as a part of the run game helps this group to be solid as well. So I'm excited about where this is going, man. And you're doing a really nice job recruiting wise too this year in what is kind of a poor offensive line crop nationally. They're making sure to get theirs, and I think it's important to keep that flow of talent coming into Tallahassee.
All right, man. This has been our offensive line preview. Again, want to thank our friends at Madison Social. LaborDayTailgate.com is the website there. LaborDayTailgate.com to join us at the LSU game. And CongruityHR.com is the website. Congruity Solutions been fantastic for the Battles In, been fantastic for the Nolecast, been fantastic for about 15 or 16 other Florida State influence business. I'll use that term. Bat Lewis, fantastic resource for us. Would be the same for you as well. Feel free to reach out to me on any form of social media if you would like a third-party introduction. But for now, that's been the offensive line preview.